Good evening. Welcome to PoliticIt podcast. Tonight we have John Dougall, John Frugal Dougall.
Frugal Dougall, that's right. I tell folks,
yeah.
My dad was Frugal Dougall before I was born. I'm the oldest of 11 kids. Frugal is all I ever knew growing up.
Oh, that's cool.
Sometimes my wife just calls me cheap. So great to be with you.
So frugal is a better word than cheap.
Yes,
right?
yes.
So John, let's talk a little bit about your background. I mean, I've known you for quite a while. I know quite a bit about that, but maybe all the voters don't. So let's talk about you. A lot of people think that, coming out of the auditor's office that you're an accountant, but you're an engineer.
I'm actually an electrical engineer. My expertise is signal processing. So.
Interesting.
And business guy. I know what it means to meet a payroll. I know who pays the taxes in the world. Served a decade in the legislature, and I've been 11 years as state auditor, being a watchdog, helping folks hold government accountable.
So what does the auditor do?
So I describe, and when I came in as auditor, I wanted to change the world. And I thought it should be the watchdog and not just the accountant for the state of Utah. And so we go in and root out waste, fraud, abuse, and corruption, and we help hold government accountable, and we help the public hold their government accountable, and we bring greater transparency to what's going on.
Well, one of the unique things that you've done as auditor that I think is really up with the times, right? These projects, these data analytics projects that you've done have been fabulous. I mean, tell people a little bit about those. I really like this Project Kids that you pioneered.
So let me get there first. When I was in the legislature, I was the House sponsor of the Financial Transparency website. And then years later, as auditor, it got moved into my office. Division of Finance was running it, and the legislature wanted to upgrade it, and so it got moved to me, and we upgraded it significantly. And you've got essentially every governmental entity in the state of Utah reporting their financial transactions in there, how much employees get paid, how much vendors get paid, and so forth. Coming out of that, we've done various other transparency initiatives, and one of them is Project Kids. And when I travel the state, the most common question I get asked is, where does the money go in public ed? Quickly followed up with, how well is it spent? And so we went off to do the impossible, which is try and track where the money goes all the way down to the student level, because we know which students are in which classes with which teachers and how much those teachers get paid. And generally, we can figure out how much it costs to run a school, and we drill that down. We have 200 spending categories on a student-by-student basis, and then we roll that up to help the public know where the money's going, how much goes to administration, how much goes to support services, how much goes to teacher pay, so then the public can determine for themselves how well is that money being spent.
Yeah, and the access to that, I mean, the public doesn't really have access to individuals, but they have access to aggregate data, right?
Yeah, for the aggregate data, you can go to kids.utah.gov. So KIDS, kids.utah.gov, and they can see the public dashboards. And we provide even more detailed information to superintendents, school personnel, and so forth.
Was it surprising for you to know that even though this data was available to superintendents, they really were never able to drill into it and understand?
Well, that's one of the interesting things. When I travel around and I talk with superintendents and I say, how much do we spend on teacher pay? In a couple minutes, they could pull a report. When I ask the question, which is, how much do we spend on math instruction? Or how much do we spend to run that school? Or how much do we spend on Mr. Jones's 8th grade science class versus Mrs. Smith's relative to the student achievement? They couldn't tell me. And I'm a business guy. I recognize the importance of aligning your financial resources, the limited financial resources that you have, behind your strategic objectives, whatever they happen to be. And public ed too often could not do that.
And so now they can.
Now they have that. And one time when we released this, we were talking with the superintendent, and what single extracurricular activity do you think high schools spend the most money on? Football, right? Football.
That's what I would say.
And in this district, it was cheerleading. They spent more on cheer than drill and more on drill than football. And he said, I knew we spent a lot of money on it, but I had no idea we spent that much money, because a lot of stuff gets funded by formulas and you don't really track it. And to me, we didn't say green good, red bad. We just said, here's what took place. And I described that as, this is the level of detail that we go into in the auditor's office. This is what I've done to try and change the world of what it means to be an auditor, not just in the traditional sense of financial statement audits, not just compliance audits, but bring greater transparency to the public so they understand where their tax dollars are going, so then they can make a better determination of how to hold government accountable. So that's one of the problems in DC. We don't know where the money's going. We're 34.6, keeps getting higher and higher every day, $34.6 trillion of debt. We spent 30% more than we take in, and our taxes are already oppressive. And people don't know where the money's really going. The Department of Defense can't even pass an audit. And on and on and on. The money just seems to flow, and Congress loves to spend.
So how does that experience help you going into Congress then?
So my experience as an engineer, it means I'm a problem solver. My experience as a businessman means I know who pays the bills. I know the burden that taxes and regulations place on business. As a legislator, I understand the legislative process. Nobody has a stronger legislative career than I have that's in this race. And I've been not just a conservative vote, but a champion time and time again on long-term issues, whether it's tax reform, pension reform, and so forth. Fighting to get government off people's backs and out of their wallets. And then as a watchdog, diving into the investigative activities to provide oversight to government agencies. This is critical to what we do at the state level, and it's critical to what goes on in Congress.
Very good. So let's talk a little bit about your before the legislative career, back when you were an engineer. What were the things that you did that you're proud of or that you think about?
Yeah, so one of the interesting things is in signal processing. I was a research student at Brigham Young University, and I was studying what's called image compression. And we take it for granted today. When you stream YouTube, you watch a show on Netflix, those videos are compressed. But in the late 80s, early 90s, that was new and novel technology. And then in the early 90s, I worked for companies in advanced high-speed telecommunication systems. So you can think fiber optic systems and so forth. Mid-90s, I was pushing data across cell phone networks. This was new and novel. I mean, back then, it was about voice, and not that many people had cell phones. And today, everything's about data for your cell phone. Back then, it was about voice. And we were pushing data across cell phone networks. And then in 2000, I went to work for a company which was in the intelligent transportation space. And we're producing sensors to monitor vehicle flow. And whenever you pull up your app today, whether it's Google Map, Waze app, something like that, and it tells you red, it's congested, green, it's free flow, well, you're getting information from sensors like we developed. And we were on the cutting edge, time and time again, cutting edge of technology. And so I tell folks, I've developed technologies which have made your lives more comfortable, your businesses more prosperous, and your country more secure. And that's what I've done. One of the things that I love is, I hate George Bernard Shaw's politics, but this quote has guided my life for decades. And it is, the reasonable man adapts himself to the world. The unreasonable man tries to adapt the world to himself. So all change comes because of unreasonable men. That's what it's been in my life when it comes to technologies, when it comes to startup businesses, when it comes to the political process. Trying to be unreasonable to drive for change. Yes, respectful in the process, but unreasonable in your expectations of we want something better.
Yeah, very good. So what would you do? What would be some of the first things you do going to Congress?
I tell folks probably the first thing I do in Congress is teach a math class, because Congress doesn't understand math. They do not understand the dire fiscal situation that we're in. And so it's trying to help them understand that. But stepping back to the broader situation, it is really looking across the whole scope of budgetary issues, fiscal matters. And at the end of the day, I know folks say there's more than fiscal matters. Actually, everything is a fiscal matter. When the federal government engages in a program, it's a fiscal matter. You care about border security, fiscal matter. Legal immigration, fiscal matter. Strong national defense, it's a fiscal matter. Tax policy, it's a fiscal matter. Regulatory oversight, it's a fiscal matter. At the end of the day, everything the government does comes back to money that they take from you and me and other taxpayers. And then they borrow 30% more.
30% more. It's getting out of control,
Well,
isn't it?
It's totally out of control. And when you look at the situation, Social Security. Social Security is the single biggest expenditure in the budget. And it's supposed to be cut 23% within 8 to 10 years. And I don't think most congressmen and women understand that that is what the math says. I've heard people say, well, that's only if Congress touches it. No, that's if Congress does not touch it. That is what will happen. And I don't believe most Democrats want to kick grandma off the bus, kick her to the curb. And I don't think most Republicans want to do it either. So I need to use that as a starting ground to give some proposals of how to address Social Security.
So what would you do?
And I get that most people say, you can't talk about Social Security. It's like a third rail of politics. But if you care about fiscal matters, you have to talk about it. So rather than nibbling around the edges, what would I propose? I would actually propose something Do you know what a 529 plan is? I assume you do, an
Yeah,
education savings
right.
account plan. I would propose something along those lines. Call it a state retirement trust fund. Any state could sponsor them. Potentially, you've got 50 states offering them, allowing workers to opt out and take their half of the payroll tax, 6.2%, and opt it into one of these state-sponsored plans. And then for the Democrats that want some type of government oversight, well, great, these are state-sponsored, you have oversight. For a guy like me that likes competition, well, guess what? I have potentially 50 states competing to offer a better retirement package to individuals. And for a guy like me that wants people to be able to get a more secure retirement by investing in the stock market, great, you can have that. Now you continue to pay the other half into the existing Social Security system to prop that up in transition. But P.J. O'Rourke said, giving money and power to the government is like giving whiskey and car keys to a teenage boy. Clearly, it's not a good combination. And so I'd be working to say, how do I provide a more secure retirement? I call this the Secure Retirement Act, a more secure retirement to individuals and getting the money out of the hands of Congress and giving individuals more security over it.
Very good. We're going to take a break, and we'll come right back. Thanks, John. Hey Siri, how do I get to the state capitol?
John, the fastest way to get to the Capitol is to make a lot of empty promises, to get help from special interest groups and endorsements from politicians. You will also need to buy a better suit.
That's not going to work for me, Siri. You need to find another way.
John, listen to me. If you're going to win your race, you will need to play the political game. You also need to use more hairspray and buy a golden retriever. Also, a new phone case would be nice.
It's enough of this.
John, are you there? Did you just leave me on the road? Fine. Keep your principles, John.
My name's John Johnson. I'm not running to be part of a system, and I don't owe anyone special favors. I'm running to listen to and work for you. I'm running to get results. Welcome back to PoliticIt. Tonight we have John Frugal Dougall on, and you're a candidate for CD3.
Third Congressional District.
Running for Congress, the John Curtis seat, basically.
Yeah. Never thought I'd be on this path, but it's an interesting experience.
So what motivated you to move down that path?
Well, it's a funny story. I've always wanted to go to law school. It's been on the bucket list for 40 years. And so I'm more than halfway through law school. I was visiting with my common law professor, and I was talking about concerns about the abuse of the Commerce Clause and Tax and Spend Clause and how Congress seems to know no bounds and how the Supreme Court is not addressing it. And he said, at the end of the day, the Supreme Court's not really going to fix these issues. And no matter how good you guys do in Utah, you're not going to fix them. If you really care about these issues, you have to be willing to go to Congress, which calls for some uncomfortable conversations with my wife at Thanksgiving as I started to talk about this concept of there's some serious problems here, and I'm concerned, and I think I have to run and share a message of fiscal sanity. I look at my 2-year-old grandson, and I know I had a better future than my parents, and they had a better future than theirs. I'm concerned.
It's gone on that way for quite a while now, right?
And I'm concerned. I don't think he's going to have a better future than I have, and that's a problem. I mean, Congress basically has driven this country off a cliff. We're hanging there by the roots. You've seen this in an Indiana Jones movie.
Right.
He's hanging there by the roots, trying to pull himself back up. And that's the situation we're in right now. You look at how they've eroded the economy, the oppressive taxes, the excessive regulations. We've offshored so many industries, the crippling debt that we have, the dysfunction in Congress. They can't get their act together on pretty much anything. And as I travel around the state, lots of people are afraid. They're trying to put food on the table, a roof over their head, concerned about their jobs. And Congress diddles away, and it feels like we're hanging off a cliff.
So how does John Dougall fix that?
Well, John Dougall fixes that by helping folks understand the fiscal situation we're in, trying to reach across the aisle. I know some people say compromise and collaboration is bad, but anything, the simple math is you have to get bipartisan agreements to get anything done in Congress. That's the simple math. So I tell folks you have to be strong in your principles and persuasive in your arguments. You have to understand where folks are at. You got to find common ground, and you know this in the legislative process. You then have to work with them to try and help them understand a better proposal. And you have to work, and it takes a lot of work to do that. When I championed tax reform in 2007, This was the most significant tax reform in generations. Folks refer to it as the Huntsman tax reform. I was the House sponsor. The economists joked that I made him run 3,000 iterations so I could get the lowest rate possible and the broadest tax cut possible.
So did that start in the House then?
Well, it was in the Senate, but
Okay.
it started with the task force in 2005.
Okay.
And it took a lot of work and a lot of negotiations back and forth. So this was not it started in the Senate, it started in the House. It was a bipartisan and actually it was the legislative and executive branch working on this for years to get a proposal that passed. But in the House, it passed unanimously. All the Democrats voted for it. And so think about how hard it is to pass anything unanimously.
Especially
even
tax reform.
Tax reform, the largest tax cut essentially at the time, and getting the Democrats to agree to it. But it required helping them understand why it was important to them personally, why it's important to their constituents, and especially for them, why it was important to public ed, why a stronger economy in Utah paid dividends to public ed, why a lower burden would actually help them with funding of schools. But that's what you have to reach across the aisle and you have to help folks understand, which means you have to understand what's important to them. And that's critical. When folks look at Congress, they do not see any kind of dialogue. They still see Republicans selling out, but they don't see Republicans doing a good job to help bring Democrats along on principles of freedom and liberty and fiscal responsibility. And too often Republicans struggle at that too.
And you're going to make some moves in that?
That's absolutely. You got to be willing. You can't just be a conservative vote. You have to be able to dive in and, if you will, throw your body into the fight.
Yeah, because it's easy to vote no, right?
It's absolutely easy. I mean, border security and fixing legal immigration is a critical issue to our nation. So look at the Senate bill that was just proposed. What happened? People threw bombs. They killed the thing essentially before it saw the light of day. Okay? From my perspective, when it comes to the legislative issues, you roll up your sleeves, you dive in. There were fatal flaws in that bill. Okay? Catch and release, fatal flaw. People crossing the border illegally, fatal flaw. But there was some decent structure in there. And you know the importance of when you have a proposal, now folks can get around it, we can shoot holes in it, we can try and figure out how to fix it. And I would have approached it as, let's spend 3 to 6 months actually seeing if we can fix this. See if we can actually fix border security, take steps to fix legal immigration rather than dismissing it out of hand. Because when we dismissed it out of hand, we actually didn't fix border security, and we gave a win to the Biden administration. We took some of the heat off, and we made it our fault, not his fault. So we're actually worse off because we didn't engage in that deep debate. So and after 6 months, if it was a good proposal, you vote for it. If it's a bad proposal, then you vote against it.
So what were the things in the Senate bill that you agreed with?
Well, the fact that they were trying to expedite asylum claims and place some restrictions on asylum claims, I thought was good. The notion of, hey, we're going to close the border, all of a sudden they're walking down a step that is a good path. So we're accepting some situations like that. And the fact that you have a structure and a framework now says you can start to work on that. There's discussions about new asylum judges, additional personnel. From my perspective, yeah, you need to expedite the process for processing asylum claims. Folks should be coming at legal ports of entry. And as I travel around the state, folks in Utah welcome legal immigration. They want people coming here living a better life. They don't want them living on welfare. They don't want them crossing illegally. We want to know who's entering the country, but they want legal immigrants able to come in the country. But you got to engage in the legislative process.
So how do we get the debt under control?
Say that again?
How do we get this national debt under control?
How do we get the national debt under control? Well, Saturday Night Live tells you, don't spend money you don't have. Don't buy stuff with money you don't have. So you have to help folks understand what's going on with the financial situation, how we can't afford everything that's there, how oppressive taxes is not going to solve the problem. You and I both know Frederick Bastiat talking about the broken window fallacy.
Right.
And really, there's that which you can see. So when you raise taxes, you can see the good you do with the taxes. But it's hard to remember the harm that you were going to cause when you force the taxes, how people would have spent their money otherwise. And so it's trying to help folks understand those basic principles and try and take baby steps down that path. The other key thing you have to do is, too often when it comes to budgets, we do omnibus bills or minibus bills, and we throw everything together, and it's a must-pass kind of concept. I want us to get back to regular order. In fact, I want us to get to more than just 12 budget bills. I would love to get us, for example, Bureau of Land Management. Let's get that in a standalone bill. Let's not defund that one. And then let's see if anybody actually notices that we didn't fund it. And be more strategic about how we go about shutting down the government, shutting down certain aspects. Because I think the federal government is 7 times bigger than it needed to be. I think it should focus on national defense and pretty much leave it to the states and the people after that.
So you have pretty strong libertarian views on a lot of things, don't you?
Yeah, very, very, very strong fiscal responsibility, low taxes, and limited government.
So what?
There's a reason they call me cut, cap, and kill in the legislature.
Right. Yeah. What about the social aspects, social conservative?
Social issues are really not a federal issue. Social issues should be left at the state and the local level and to the people. When you look at the federal government, it shouldn't be getting into all sorts of social issues. Too often it's getting sucked into it, but that is not the job of the federal government.
Which is actually the Supreme Court decision on abortion, right? It was basically
pushing it back to the states. And I know some are saying we need an anti-abortion law at the federal level. I lived in California for a while.
I
think we will end up
does what the Supreme Court just did.
Well, yeah, it says we've been preaching this for 50 years. We didn't really mean what we said. And I think we will end up with a California-style pro-abortion bill if it's pushed at the federal level. If you care about saving babies' lives, then you need to keep pushing that down to the state level.
Very good. So when we look at, a lot of people talk about the Federal Reserve and printing currency and stuff like that. How do we get that under control?
Well, you got even more serious control. When you look at central bank digital currency, and ultimately on that path, the federal government potentially wants to push the banking sector out of the economy. And so we have a Congress that isn't providing oversight and yet is allowing certain agencies and certain industries to go down a path. Utah actually has the 5th strongest banking economy in the nation. Our banking economy is even stronger than California's. Most people don't recognize that. And so we need a champion who understands these issues.
We're kind of the center for industrial bank.
Absolutely. Right? Over 93% of the assets are headquartered right here in Utah. You need somebody with the financial experience who can go in and fight to protect not just Utah's economy, but the national economy. And banking is just one aspect of that.
And as auditor, you've clearly had experience in that area, haven't you?
Absolutely. My background is financial and oversight and championing conservative causes.
So we're about out of time. So what
really, I thought we were just getting going.
Yeah. Well, what would be your final pitch to mom and pop at home that are worried about issues like this?
I'm Frugal Dougall. I've spent years fighting to get government off your back and out of your wallet. My job, too often people talk about electing a hero to go to Congress. My job is to get government off your back, out of your wallet, protect your rights, and leave you free to govern yourself. Because the heroes in America, the heroes in Utah are each one of you, whether it's in your families, your businesses, your communities. My job is to get government out of the way so you can live a great life and have a great future, so your kid's future is better than your own.
Thank you. John Frugal Dougall. Nice having you.
Great to be with you.
We'll see you guys next week.
Vote Frugal.
Yeah. See you later.